Supreme Court Justice Patricia Williams's laughter echoed through the congressional chamber, and no one could predict what would happen in the next 30 seconds. The 68-year-old renowned justice looked at the 43-year-old Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sitting across from her and said with a smile, "Young lady, if constitutional law were that simple, everyone would be a Supreme Court justice." The chamber fell silent. Crockett calmly opened her folder and looked at Williams. At that moment, no one could know that the Harvard Law School graduate Congresswoman possessed information that would completely destroy America's most powerful justice. "Justice Williams," Crockett said, her voice ice-cold and determined, "before we discuss your understanding of constitutional law, perhaps you'd like to review some of your past decisions." Williams's smile froze. The documents in Crockett's hands contained secrets powerful enough to end her career. And Jasmine Crockett was about to use them all. Before this video starts, don't forget to hit like and subscribe because what you're about to witness will be one of the most shocking moments in American political history. A tense atmosphere pervaded the Congressional building in Washington, D.C. At the Judiciary Committee's extraordinary meeting, Supreme Court reforms were being discussed, and two powerful women had come face to face. Justice Patricia Williams was the undisputed queen of the American legal system. At 68, Williams had served on the Supreme Court for 15 years, known for her conservative views and stern demeanor. A Yale Law School graduate, Williams had never tasted defeat throughout her career. Her gray hair was neatly styled, radiating authority in her black suit. Williams's eyes focused on the young woman sitting across the table. Jasmine Crockett, 43, was a congresswoman elected from Texas. A Harvard Law graduate, Crockett had worked for years as a civil rights attorney before entering politics. She had quickly gained fame with her brilliant intellect and sharp investigative techniques. When the committee chairman opened the meeting, Williams began speaking with confident authority. "Committee members," she said, her voice full of authority, "the independence of the Supreme Court is one of America's cornerstones. Attempting to interfere with this institution's functioning goes against the spirit of our Constitution." Crockett listened carefully. As Williams spoke about the Supreme Court's untouchability and judicial independence, Crockett's mind went through her past decisions, especially those controversial decisions that restricted citizens' fundamental rights. "Justice Williams," Crockett said, taking her first words, "I acknowledge the importance of judicial independence. However, does this independence mean exemption from accountability?" Williams's eyebrows furrowed. "Young lady, Supreme Court justices are responsible to the Constitution, not to political agendas." "Political agendas." Crockett's voice sharpened. "Is protecting civil rights now considered a political agenda?" Williams laughed lightly, with a patronizing attitude. "Congresswoman Crockett, constitutional law is quite a complex field. Theoretical knowledge learned in university courses doesn't always reflect the complexity of real life." The chamber fell silent. Williams had just openly condescended to Crockett. She was trying to portray a Harvard graduate attorney as an inexperienced young politician. Slight smile appeared on Crockett's face. Those who followed her congressional interrogations knew this smile well. It was the sign of calm before the storm. "Justice Williams," Crockett said, the calm in her voice deceptive, "speaking of theoretical knowledge, let's move to practical applications. Do you remember the Richardson v. Texas decision you made in 2019? Williams's facial expression changed. The Richardson case was a controversial decision about voting rights, and Williams was known to have voted to restrict voting rights. "That decision was based on constitutional foundations," Williams said, uncertainty in her voice for the first time. "Constitutional foundations." Crockett pulled out a document from her folder. "In that case, you stated in the minority opinion that voter ID laws were discriminatory. So why did you change your mind later?" Williams's face reddened. "I never changed my mind. Legal assessments can deepen over time." Or, Crockett's voice became even sharper, "did the $50,000 educational grant you received from the Conservative Law Foundation change your mind?" The chamber erupted. Crockett had just accused Williams of taking bribes. Williams's face went white. "This is slander." Williams shouted. "No such thing ever happened." Crockett calmly pulled out another document. According to IRS records, 3 months before the Richardson decision, money was transferred from this foundation to your personal account. The documents are here. Williams's world was crumbling. This information she had hidden for years had been exposed by the young Congresswoman. But Crockett was just getting started. She had more documents in her hands that would completely destroy Williams. Justice Williams, Crockett said, her eyes focused on Williams like lasers. Constitutional law is indeed complex, especially for judges who take bribes. Williams had lost color in her face, but was trying to compose herself. Years of judicial experience had taught her to maintain composure even in the most difficult moments. However, the young woman across from her was a different kind of opponent than she had ever faced. "Congresswoman Crockett," Williams said, her voice trembling, "you're making serious allegations. Such documents can be easily manipulated." Crockett's smile widened. Manipulation? Interesting word choice, Justice Williams. Because speaking of manipulation, we can also discuss your Jenkins v. California decision in 2020. Williams's heart began beating rapidly. The Jenkins case was an extremely controversial decision about election security, and Williams's role in that case was completely unknown. Crockett pulled out a thick envelope from her folder. "Documents obtained from the FBI," she said, holding the envelope up. "Minutes of the secret meeting you had with the White House counsel's office 2 weeks before the Jenkins case." The chamber held its breath. Supreme Court justices meeting with political figures about cases was absolutely forbidden. This was the most fundamental violation of judicial independence. "That meeting was routine legal consultation," Williams said, her voice growing weaker. "Routine." Crockett opened the document and began reading. Conversation between White House counsel Sarah Henderson and Justice Patricia Williams. Henderson, "The administration expects a favorable decision in the Jenkins case. This is critical for election security." Williams, "I understand the situation. I will render the appropriate decision." The chamber fell completely silent. Williams's face was now ghostly white. The words just read were clear evidence that she had violated judicial independence. These records were illegally obtained. Williams shouted in desperation. "Illegal." Crockett pulled out another document. "The search warrant signed by the FBI director is here. Completely legal. And more interestingly, a video recording of this meeting also exists." Williams's world was collapsing. If there was a video recording, she couldn't continue denying. But Crockett wasn't finished yet. "Of course, the Jenkins case is just the tip of the iceberg," Crockett said, the cold determination in her voice increasingly growing. "The real scandal happened in the Pembroke Industries case." When the name Pembroke was heard, Williams's last support also collapsed. No one was supposed to know about this case. It had even been kept secret in the FBI investigation. Pembroke Industries versus Environmental Protection Agency case, Crockett said, laying out her accusation like a prosecutor. "The decision that canceled billions of dollars in environmental penalties. And you, Justice Williams, had a private dinner with Pembroke's CEO Michael Pembroke before making that decision." Williams could no longer speak. The Pembroke dinner was the biggest mistake of her career, and no one was supposed to learn about it. "At that dinner," Crockett continued, "Pembroke offered you a $2 million donation for your daughter's admission to Harvard. And by amazing coincidence, you ruled in his favor." The chamber had now turned into complete chaos. Journalists were furiously taking notes. Other committee members were looking on in shock. If these allegations were true, Williams would not only leave office but would face criminal investigation. "These aren't things you can prove," Williams said, trying to defend herself one last time. Crockett pulled out a tablet. "Video call recording," she said calmly. "Conversation between you and Pembroke. FBI wiretap records." She pressed play on the tablet. Williams's voice echoed throughout the chamber. "Michael, this decision affects the court's credibility. But my daughter's future is also important." Pembroke's voice, "Patricia, $2 million is just the beginning. If she gets into Harvard, Stanford Law School is also guaranteed." Williams's voice again, "The decision will be rendered appropriately. No one will suspect anything." The chamber was on its feet applauding. Crockett had just exposed the biggest judicial scandal in American history live. Williams sat collapsed, her career completely over. But Crockett wasn't finished yet. The biggest bomb hadn't been detonated yet. Williams's collapse had fully materialized, but Crockett wanted to finish her off. While the chamber was still in shock, Crockett stood up and walked toward Williams. "Justice Williams," she said, her voice now carrying full authority, "you told me constitutional law was complex. Perhaps it's time to give you a real constitutional lesson." Williams couldn't lift her head. The respect she had protected for years had vanished in minutes. Article 3 of the Constitution, Crockett began speaking with a teacher's manner, guarantees the independence of the judicial branch. But this independence doesn't give carte blanche to corruption. Crockett pointed her finger toward Williams. What did Alexander Hamilton write in the Federalist Papers? Judges hold their offices during good behavior. Good behavior, Justice Williams. Something you've never done. The chamber listened mesmerized. Crockett wasn't just exposing scandal, she was also giving a constitutional law lesson. In James Madison's Virginia Plan, Crockett continued, when judicial review authority was defined, it was emphasized that judges should stay away from politics. You, however, placed political interests at the center of your judicial decisions. Williams finally could speak, her voice like a whisper, I only what? Crockett's voice was like a sharp knife. Did you only sell your country's constitution for $2 million? Crockett returned to the table and pulled out another document. Because this isn't just the Pembroke case. In the last 5 years, similar coincidences occurred in a total of 27 cases. This number echoed throughout the chamber. 27 cases. Williams was systematically selling justice. Energy Corp versus EPA Gulf with CEO before decision. Crockett began reading the list. Pharmaceutical giants versus FDA, purchased company stock before decision. Banking consortium versus Treasury, private jet travel before decision. Each name was like a shovel of dirt thrown on Williams's grave. Everyone now understood this wasn't isolated incidents, but systematic corruption. And the most scandalous, Crockett's voice had now mesmerized everyone, the 2018 election case. The most controversial election decision since Bush v. Gore. And you, Justice Williams, received donations from political party funds before making that decision. Williams's last resistance was broken. You can't prove this, she mumbled. Crockett smiled. FEC records. Bank account statements. Phone records. The FBI has been following you for 3 years, Justice Williams. All the evidence is there. The chamber was now on its feet applauding. No one expected such an expose to happen live. Constitutional law is indeed complex, Crockett said, preparing to deliver the final blow to Williams. Especially when judges ignore the Constitution. But let me give you a simple constitutional lesson. Crockett pulled out a constitution from her pocket. 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. All citizens are equal before the law. You, however, distributed more equal justice to those who paid. 5th Amendment, Due Process Clause. No one can be deprived of their rights and freedoms without due process. You, however, sold due process to the highest bidder. Each amendment was proof of how Williams had betrayed the Constitution. And most importantly, Crockett raised her voice, the preamble to the Constitution, to establish justice. You sold justice, Justice Williams. For 15 years. Williams was now crying. She understood that her years of service were over, and she even faced imprisonment. Finally, Crockett said, preparing to detonate her biggest bomb, let's talk about the impeachment process. Because tomorrow morning, I will submit a motion to the House of Representatives for your removal. The chamber went wild. Crockett wasn't just exposing the scandal, she was taking action to remove Williams from office. Article 2 of the Constitution says judges can be removed for bad behavior. Bribery, perjury, injustice, all of these are bad behavior. Williams tried to speak one last time. This is a political attack. Political. Crockett laughed. Protecting the Constitution isn't political, Justice Williams. It's duty. And I will do my duty. Now Williams's end had come. But Crockett's final surprise would shock everyone. As Crockett's impeachment announcement echoed throughout the chamber, Williams's world had completely collapsed. But the young Congresswoman wasn't finished yet. She had saved her biggest surprise for last. "Of course, Justice Williams," Crockett said, with cold determination in her voice. "What's truly shocking is something else. You're not just a judge. You're also the leader of a criminal organization." These words were enough to freeze the chamber. Criminal organization? Was Williams not just a corrupt judge, but a criminal? Crockett opened the thickest file. Operation Blind Justice, FBI's 3-year covert operation. Codename, Queen. Target, Patricia Williams. Williams's face was now like death. Knowing the name of the FBI operation showed that Crockett came not just with documents, but with real intelligence information. Since 2021, Crockett was laying out the accusation like a prosecutor. The network you established with 9 federal judges, 14 state judges, and 23 major company CEOs. Name, Justice Cartel. The chamber held its breath. Crockett had just exposed the biggest judicial conspiracy in American history. "The system worked like this," Crockett said, reading from the FBI file. "Big companies pay money to your network. You direct cases to appropriate judges. Decisions are known in advance." Williams could no longer say anything. Years of covert operation had been exposed. Energy cartel, $2.3 billion tax evasion, laundered. Crockett continued reading the list. Pharmaceutical ring, illegal drug tests, ignored. Banking syndicate, $5.7 billion money laundering, covered up. Each figure showed the magnitude of Williams's criminal empire. And the biggest scandal, Crockett's voice now filled the entire chamber, the election security coalition you established during the 2020 elections. Actually an organization established to manipulate election results. This claim had a bombshell effect. Williams wasn't just taking bribes, she was also trying to manipulate elections. Critical cases in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Crockett held up her documents. All decided by judges under your network's control. Coincidence? No. Plan. Williams tried to defend herself one last time. "None of these allegations are true. The FBI operation is also illegal." Crockett laughed. "Illegal?" Operation started with FBI director's signature. Investigation continued with Attorney General's approval. And, she paused for her biggest surprise. And results announced with the president's approval. The chamber went wild. Even the president knew about this operation. Because Justice Williams, Crockett played her final card. "I'm not just a congresswoman. I'm the FBI's collaborator in this operation." This announcement shocked everyone. Was Crockett a secret FBI agent? While studying at Harvard Law, Crockett began telling the story. "The FBI approached me. I was asked to work on judicial corruption. After being elected to Congress, I officially took on this mission." Williams's mouth hung open. The young woman across from her had been trying to trap her for 3 years. "Today's exposé," Crockett said, "is actually the final move coordinated by the FBI. Right now, in 15 different cities, 47 people in your network are being arrested." Crockett looked at her phone. "According to the message I just received, your husband Richard Williams is also in custody. Because he's also the leader of the network's financing arm." Williams collapsed. Not only herself, but her family was also involved in this scandal. And the best part, Crockett delivered the final blow. "The $47 million in your offshore accounts was also frozen today. Thanks to secret documents in the Panama Papers." Williams's fortune was also gone. She no longer had career, freedom, or money left. "Justice Williams," Crockett said, looking at her one last time, "you told me constitutional law was complex. But there's a simple truth. Justice will prevail sooner or later." At that moment, FBI agents entered the chamber. They had come to arrest Williams. "Patricia Williams," the lead agent said, "you're under arrest. For charges of bribery, selling justice, organized crime, and election manipulation." As Williams was handcuffed, Crockett said her final words to her. "This is a real constitutional law lesson, Justice Williams. No one is above the law." The chamber was on its feet applauding. Crockett had not only exposed a corrupt judge but had brought down an entire criminal network. An hour later, the whole world was talking about the news. #Jasmine Crockett Hero was trending. The video had been watched 50 million times. And Williams? She was now just a bad memory in history. Crockett, however, would be remembered as the hero who protected the American justice system. Ending, America had seen what a true hero looked like.